Good morning, and welcome to the first Blockchain Security Standards Council webinar called How BSSC is Building Confidence in Blockchain Technology. My name is Adam Rack. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for BSSC, and will be moderating today's panel and discussion. First, I wanted to just do a quick intro of our panels. I'll start with one of our main speakers, Annalee Sanders. So Annalee is a BSSC board member and COO of Figment. Anna is an influential technology and security leader with nearly 2 decades of experience specializing in information security, governance, compliance, support, technology, and operational strategy. She currently serves as the COO of and Chief Security Officer at Figment, the leading independent staking infrastructure provider for institutions dedicated to advancing the adoption of Web3. She has an extensive security background, including her CISSP, and is passionate about embedding a proactive security culture across the Web3 landscape to strengthen risk posture, prevent compromise, and reduce operational loss. So Anna is going to give an overview of the Blockchain Security Standards Council, why we came about. We operate as a nonprofit consortium focused on strengthening confidence in end-to-end security. And Anna will, I'll turn it over to her, and then we'll go to the panel. And then let me just do a quick, I think one more slide on our members, unless we jump past. So we're always looking for more members. We appreciate the 11 that we have right now. We just launched last year, and we're looking for more. So if you're interested, please reach out after, but I will turn it over to Anna.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am going to quickly do an overview before I hand it off to the rest of the group. Who we are, we're really a group of founding companies and technical contributors in the blockchain industry. And we are passionate about security. We're also passionate about the success and the continuity of blockchain. We live in it, we understand the gaps, and we strive to prevent compromise, defend against exploits, educate, and the number one thing is really to build trust. I'm proud to say that we have some of the best minds merging security practices and blockchain functionality to create these standards that we're about ready to talk about. We have lots of combined experience solving security problems, mitigating risk within this blockchain ecosystem. And really, there's 2 realities here. 1, DeFi is not TradFi. And 2, security historically has always had to catch up to new tech. And I think in our case, the timing couldn't be more perfect. When I talk about the blockchain ecosystem, I'm really referencing all the various roles and layers within a tech stack. Like if we were to look at it from a roles and responsibilities visual, there's various layers and functions. For example, basic tech layer dependencies such as like systems and applications, networking, code, etc. And then the various roles like a staking provider, custodian, exchange, developers, token holders, etc. And really the functionality and the components within all of that is what needs attention, such as securing the keys, securing the transactions, even applying traditional security controls to prevent and mitigate exploits or bugs or misconfigurations that happen. In short, existing audit standards, they don't really fit, right? The risk within our industry isn't really understood and it's incorrectly assumed. So really auditing to a PII or a PCI or some of the older standards, it just doesn't make sense. Sure, there are kind of basics, but at the end of the day, there's those functionalities within the blockchain that is what we are focusing on. So what we're trying to do is really reframe. We don't believe in check the box security. We believe in controls that add value, and while weighing scalability and performance of the chain. So to reiterate, again, most traditional security controls really don't apply, or B, there are some areas that do require guidance. And I think this is really an amazing opportunity for us to merge these 2 problem statements and incorporate security by design. So how we got here today, like just right now, is a little over, well, maybe a year ago, we started this group, right? These group of founding companies and technical contributors, and our highest priority or our biggest challenge was, what do we focus on? So to develop these standards that we're about ready to talk about today, we queried all the compromises known at the time, and we determined the most critical areas of focus. Like I said, we pulled in the best minds in the room and we tackled each problem space. Again, the hardest part was determine what to work on first, and we still have more to come. So today you're going to hear from Joel, Mark, and Max, and they're going to do a deep dive within our first set of standards: node operation, token integration, key management, and some general security practices. So before I hand it off, it's really, truly an amazing time in our industry. Adoption is real, blockchain isn't going anywhere, and the regulation is evolving. So it's truly a very exciting time. And I'll hand it back off to you.
Great. Thank you, Anne-Lee. And we'll hear from you at the end as well. So you get to be the opener and the closer here today. So thank you for that. I just want to mention too, if you have questions, please just put them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll get to those after we have some time allotted for that. Let me take a minute now just to introduce the panel a little bit more, and we'll run into the presentation and the discussions. So first, I'll go with Mark Nesbitt, who is an expert in security and in the security of cryptocurrency. He has been working at Turnkey for the past year, focusing on key management, security, and architecture. He joined Turnkey after more than 6 years at Coinbase, where he created the blockchain security function. He's passionate about making cryptocurrency accessible to everyone, which necessitates solving very real, very hard security problems. And as you can imagine, Mark will be touching on that key management side. Joel Kerr is a security leader at Coinbase, specializing in blockchain, DeFi, and institutional custody. He brings over a decade of experience in secure software development, architectural security, and technical leadership. He has published standards on key management, node infrastructure, and digital asset security, and is passionate about securing the future of Web3. And last, we have Max Corshane-Mackey, with 11 years of offensive security, primarily in the defense sector. Max specializes in high assurance systems. He's currently the security architect at Figment, where he also leads the red team there. And Max is also passionate about applying foundational security principles of emerging technologies. So welcome to all of you. We want to get into a deeper dive on some of the standards. We also have as Anna mentioned, our fourth standard, so we'll cover that general privacy and security afterwards. But I'll start with Max first on the node operation standard. So tell me a little bit about sort of what that standard is, what we were hoping to achieve with it, and kind of your view of how that process went and where we are to date.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. Appreciate that. Node operation standard, it's a set of security requirements for companies operating blockchain nodes. Fairly self-explanatory, but this covers a lot of different companies, right? Staking companies, exchanges, custodians. If you're running a node, this standard would apply to you and these controls apply to you. Unlike most other standards, the NOS was intentionally designed to be chain agnostic, which is, I think, a big selling point of this standard. It means it applies to any blockchain network. We made that decision early on, recognizing that each protocol has unique quirks and complexities, but there's foundational security practices and operational behaviors that are consistent across like multiple networks and across the whole ecosystem, right? So rather than asking node operators to wait for like very in-depth protocol-specific standards to be developed, the NODs provides that way for them to like adhere to a universal framework, right? They can adopt it today. The NOS covers like the full life cycle of node operation activities, right? So starting from the decisions that you have to make on onboarding a new protocol, right? Like deciding to run a new node for a new network. There's a lot of considerations there, how you evaluate that. And then it continues through how to make sure your node is secure, compliant, in like its participation in the network, and extends to like operational resilience and access controls and system hardening and all the good stuff that keeps nodes secure, reliable, and protected. We also included specific requirements in a section that focuses on transparency. And this is a little bit different from the other standards. But this is to ensure that node operators clearly communicate their service terms to clients and partners, given the complexities across different protocols, important details like the availability of pre-signed exit transactions and sort of the mechanisms around that, and or like insurance insurance coverage, right, related to node availability. Really, they have to be explicitly stated, for clients and partners. I think the end result is any operator who meets those requirements ends up demonstrating deep expertise in the blockchain that they support and that they run nodes for, and have a strong understanding of the nuances of the network participation, protocol mechanics, and security best practices, right? One more thing I'd like to touch on is that because we're protocol agnostic, the goal is to really raise the baseline for secure node operations, not just for that single protocol, right, but for the whole ecosystem. And we want to clearly define what good looks like when it comes to operating a node. That way, clients, partners have greater confidence in the infrastructure that they're supporting or that they're investing in, and they can be sure that the networks are trustworthy and professionally managed. Getting it right is critical because node operations serve as the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3, right? We often forget, we live in Web 3 world. It's really easy to forget that, like, we're living in Web 2, right? This is a layer on top of that. So while there's already like a ton of really well-established standards for running servers in Web 2 world and access controls and patching and all that kind of stuff, the node operation standard builds on top of those foundations. So it adds blockchain-specific context and guidance tailored to those unique risks and responsibilities that node operators have. If your nodes aren't run securely, the integrity of the entire network is at risk.
All right, thank you, Max. That's a lot to take in. So, thank you. You've obviously spent a lot of time on this. All right, let me turn over to Joel, and I'll kind of just ask you the same question with the token integration standard. I mean, that we released those 4 to start with about 2 months ago, and tell me a little bit about the token integration standard. Your work around that. What were you trying to achieve with that one, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the token integration standard, it's really focused on digital assets that are tokens deployed on blockchains, right? And so it is everything related to the ability to safe custody those, the security of those smart contracts, preventing any sort of vulnerable functionality there, and also general security awareness and baseline controls for those tokens. You can kind of see it as a what exactly would be needed for a developer, custodian, and holder of these tokens to know like they feel confident in it. At a high level, there's a lot of different considerations within the standard. I think some of the ones I really want to call out to begin with is for the standard, we really want to make sure that people generating and maintaining digital assets, do not have the ability to unilaterally take away the asset from the holder, right? I think that's a big concern that we have within the standard, and one that we have within Coinbase is making sure that if you are buying an asset, you can safely custody it. So the standard goes into a lot about like functionality that could potentially impact the ability of the holder to maintain their balance, and then demonstrating if the token has those in place, like how do you control that? How do you prevent the usage of that functionality? Another thing we talk about is transaction fees. That's an interesting little area where, if a token has a transaction fee, then it could be used in a way that's potentially malicious. It's not saying that it is malicious, it's just something that we want to provide guidance on. And then, of course, the ability to update that contract and update the balance and the logic on that contract is something we look at very closely. So we really look at the underlying, how you maintain the state of that asset. How do you ensure that matches what the anticipated state is of either the holder or the custodian? So it's a lot of general security guidance, but it's also very pointed, if you want to be a digital asset, here are the things that you should consider for safe custody and safe harbor.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. All right, let's turn to our third standard, Mark, last but not least in this one. So on key management, tell me a little bit about kind of what that standard is, where we're hoping to go with that, and your sort of experience going through building that out and working with the organization on that.
Sure. Yeah, the purpose of the key management standard is to provide guidelines to securely manage blockchain cryptographic keys, which we've defined as any private key that can cause a state change on a blockchain. So we're trying to match most people's intuition there, but with a precise definition. And I think, Adam, I don't know if this came up earlier, but if we could maybe drop into chat the links to the standards, if folks wanted to kind of click through them right now, that could be helpful. I think blockchainssc.org is our website, and you can find it pretty quickly anyway, just navigating through your browser. But to walk you through just a few things to point out about the key management standard, we look at the negative outcomes that we're hoping to provide guidance to help people avoid in two main areas. A lot of times people will talk about the loss of keys, which is correctly a problem, but it's a little ambiguous. So we break loss into two main types. There's theft and there's destruction. So we're looking to avoid both of those outcomes, and a lot of times trying to avoid one can actually increase the risk of the other. So the guidance is written to find a way to navigate and walk that line. The standard has two main parts. It has kind of a general section as well as parts or a section where we address specific parts of the key management lifecycle. So examples of different stages in the lifecycle might be a key generation or a key use or key retirement. There are a few other stages, and we walk them through. If you hop to the link, I see Adam has just posted it there. Thanks, Adam. You can kind of see that's laid out pretty clearly. It's a core part of the structure of the doc. The last thing I would add is, there are a lot. Key management is not a new field when it comes to blockchain security. We're trying to provide guidance specific to, like I said, blockchain cryptographic keys, which can create a state change on a blockchain. So we do hope that this is sort of a supplemental with other industry and federal key management guidelines that allows people really focusing on blockchain to get highly specific, actionable guidance for their particular needs.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And that was a great idea for the chat. As you saw, as a good sort of, deputy executive director, I do what my members tell me to do. So Mark, let's stay with you and just follow up. So, you talked about the standard, kind of how that works, and then tell me a little bit sort of how you expect that to evolve over time as, as the technology changes, as things change. Where do you see the standard evolving and going over the next couple of years?
Right. So we thought it was really important to get the standard out into the world to get feedback. That's really the best way. Iteration, is the best way to really evolve and improve something. So for the initial release of these standards, we wanted to create a simple baseline, one that many people could buy into and was actionable, but sort of really raises the floor just to provide a common sense baseline. The way that I expect the standard to evolve over time would be to slightly alter that focus now that we have accomplished that and seek to add deep dives into potentially new or exciting areas. So one of them, ones that comes to mind when you think about key management in cryptocurrency is MPC. And we think that anyone who has an MPC signing system can still benefit from our key management guidance. A lot of the guidance that we have now, like I said, was very baseline, largely universal, but we could certainly add a section where we drill down deeper into, all right, well, what are the special considerations that you need if you wanted to have an MPC signing system? Another example that comes to mind, which might seem kind of far off or speculative, but if you look at what major intelligence agencies say about the advent of quantum computers and when they would like to retire classical crypto systems, it is in the next handful of years that they're recommending that you retire the non-quantum resistant signing algorithms and encryption algorithms. So that's another area that potentially I could see us expanding, sort of doing a deep dive where we specialize in saying, hey, for this transition, for this particular risk, specifically with blockchains, like I mentioned, we want to focus on blockchains because we can have specific actionable advice. For instance, we can talk about things like transactions sitting in the mempool, or we can talk about the concept of an address, which is a hashed public key. And so we're able to get a little more specific than something that's more general key management guidance, while So that's sort of like the advantage, I guess, of having a blockchain specific key management guidance. Those two areas, MPC and quantum computers, are areas that jump to mind. I mean, I'm sure there are others in this vein where we can refine and get even more specific into a particular, like slightly narrower area of key management.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Joel, turning to you sort of with the token integration standard, what other security considerations for the future of this and other token related standards do you see? Like where do you see that evolving and how we're looking at that over time as well?
Yeah, so kind of like what Mark said, when we're thinking about key management for crypto, it's very different than the old paradigm, right? Similarly here for token integration, it's really looking at the smart contracts and the functionality of these contracts and the code and how you secure that. And so the baseline here is essentially we want to provide a set of controls and a set of guidances around what type of functionality that code can do. You can think of this as within the more Web 2 side, TradFi side. We have some of these baseline controls of what a good program looks like, or a good more traditional asset. And so we want to start building that baseline control for tokens here as well. Right now, the standard is really based a little bit more on Solidity and ERC20 type tokens, and it really is focused on I'll point out like the ERC20 side and the token side. I think both of these are expansion areas for us. We think that while the current set is really good for that particular type, it could be expansions into other different token types that might have unique considerations based on how the chain that supports the token is set up. Similarly, not all things on chain are tokens and digital assets. And so we want to start thinking more broadly about general, programs that are developed on chain, general, SDLC best practices, around Web3, similar to how you have Web 2 side of it. And so I think a lot of what we plan to do in the future is make it so it's a little bit more generic in some ways, with the expansion to other types of programs on chain, while also being very specific in other ways for different types of digital assets and different types of considerations based on the underlying chain. So I really see it, evolving over time to provide that baseline control like it is today, but also getting very specific in different areas and making it so it's more of like a widely used standard across the whole on-chain space.
If I could jump in there, Adam, also one thing
I
think it's useful to add about the token integration standard is providing a common understanding or common recognition of certain risks within tokens, where I think when tokens were first being designed, there can be some questions around, well, what sort of privileges should we write into a token? Is this okay to do? And I think recognizing, Joel mentioned earlier, fees is like a particular example where that's a perfectly valid use case for certain tokens, and someone might write a token this way. But to also recognize that this is a potential vector of risk. Doesn't mean that fees are wrong or shouldn't be added to a particular token, but it's also good for everyone to have sort of a common baseline understanding, like, hey, this is an area we should look more closely at. So I feel like adding that common language and common understanding across different chains, different ecosystems, different players within the ecosystems is a big part of the token integration standard, as well as all of them in general. But I think a lot of specifically that comes to mind with the token integration standard.
No, that's a good point. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for adding that. Max, anything on this standard? You want to on Joel's response or Mark's, or if not, well, all right. You're next up
took
anyway.
Words out of my mouth. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, I mean, on the node operation standard, turning back to that, so it's not the only standard out there. So we've got like, how does this standard compare with the other operation security standards, node operation security standards, such as like liquid collectives, NORs, or Lido's, Duck framework? What does it compare? How does it look compared to the other ones that are out there?
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think both the standards you mentioned, they're both robust standards. They both have good committees, good backing. I think the approach to node security between sort of our standard and those ones are a bit different, right? So I called out the chain agnostic. NORS is very specifically focused on the Ethereum blockchain. So like it provides very specific controls, very specific configurations for Ethereum, and is, you know, very high quality standard. Duck is also a slightly different approach, right? So they're like bridging a bit more of like the Web 2 language, but they're focused on staking providers. They do what I really like about Duck is like they go over a whole bunch of risks, right? So like, again, common language, but the approach is different, right? NOS was designed to cover all blockchains, past, future, and present. And I know that's a big, you know, a tall order, but that's why you start at V1 and you keep pushing as new things come out, new types of nodes, and how the industry iterates. But really, we're going after specific behaviors that these node operators employ, right? So we're not going to say how you should specifically, you know, run your node in this whatever blockchain. We're going to say, you know, if the node that you're operating is part of a proof of stake blockchain or a proof of work blockchain, well, then you have to think about hash power or staking power. And there's like a 33% and there's a 50%, right? So it's more about raising the education, making sure that these companies are aware of how to think about, you know, different security issues with all of the different blockchain networks, and that they're making good decisions for the networks that they decide to onboard.
Awesome. Thank you, Max. I'm hearing a theme of getting some common language in there and everything. And let me, Joel, turn back to you on, you know, how does this standard kind of compare to ETH Trust, and what are considerations when you're kind of using either one of those?
Yeah, so for ETH Trust and other types of token standards, I'm going to talk specifically about ETH Trust here. I think ETH Trust is a fantastic standard. It's very comprehensive, very, very, you know, thick in a lot of ways. And I think that's, you know, fantastic to have. You know, I think the goal for the BSSC token integration standard is to be a little bit more approachable, you know, make it so like, here are the, you know, top of mind considerations. These are the things that you really must do and what you really want to be looking at. And so I think the goal here is to really like say, you know, if you're a asset creator, if you're a custodian, or if you're a holder, like, you know, what are my primary considerations? What are the main things that could potentially impact me? That's not to say that ETH Trust doesn't have that baked in. It's just, if you look at those standards and that set, it's very comprehensive. And while that's fantastic, we also want to make it so that the BSSC is fairly approachable in a lot of ways. You know, I think the goal of this is kind of similar to how other Web 2 companies do like a top 10 type thing or a baseline control type thing. And so while I think that there's value in that very rigid, robust process, I think there's also value in saying, like, when I'm looking to create a digital asset, these are the top 10 things I really should look for. You know, the ability of the super user, you know, are there fees? How do they handle logic around transactions? You know, what type of like race conditions are there? You know, these are the things that I think we just really wanted to hit on when it came to this standard. And like I mentioned earlier, I think we will grow the standard in our set of standards over time, particularly around on-chain application development, and likely will include a lot more of controls like what ETH Trust has. But I think for now, like the starting point is to give us a very like rigid or very, you know, direct framework that can be utilized for digital assets.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. So before I want to get to the general security and privacy standard, but I think sort of just to kind of cover everything across the board on these is sort of, so we've got these standards published, they're out there, we dropped them in the chat. Where do we go from each of these? What's sort of the adoption certification roadmap? How do we get these out, moving more in the public, get the adoption, getting them auditable? Sort of where do you see as the next steps on that? And I think, you know, Anna, if you want to jump in on this one too, if you have any thoughts, happy to have that as well. But let's start with Max, and then we'll jump around a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think the first step is putting your money where your mouth is, right? So we're starting to self-assess internally, all the member companies, specifically for node operation. We're starting the conversation early of, making sure that maybe not to the level of like an auditable, process where we're like finding evidence, but we're going through at our various companies to make sure that like the way that we decide to run nodes is in line with the node operation standard. And that's really step one. And I'd encourage anyone else on on the webinar, if the node operation standard seems interesting to you, if you operate nodes, which is a good chance that you do, I would say go take a look at it. Right, like the link was dropped. Go take a look. If it tickles your fancy and you're interested, you can also join BSSC and help contribute to future versions. It's certainly not complete. There's other things that we want to do, like add specific controls around RPC nodes, which we specifically didn't include in this version. But if you have opinions, like now's the time to do it. Right, it's like really community involvement, because I don't think standards like these are best when just a few people draft them. You really need like the entire of the ecosystem coming in and providing their sort of their view of the world and their opinions, and you end up getting something that's like way more valuable at the end, right? So yeah, we're self-assessing. We're going through that process, but we're also bringing it into a more auditable format, I think, right? So like, what specific evidence should you go collect? Can you use to prove a specific requirement?
Great. A lot going on at Figment with it. How about Mark? What about Turnkey and what you guys are doing internally as well, and how do you see us kind of promoting the key management standard and getting more adoption?
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different areas we could continue to work on, and I think I want to echo what Max said, is that we wanted to get these out into the world. We want people to be able to join and contribute and source input from a broad base. So there's still a lot of work left to be done. I mean, I mentioned before, we can define more specific areas to dive into, where I mentioned MPC and quantum computers. We can refine what already exists, we can broaden it. I think the biggest focus for me right now on the key management standard is creating it into an auditable, certifiable standard, where folks can say, hey, I have the BSSC key management standard. I pass, certified. And that has a very specific meaning. It's something you can hire a third-party auditor to attest to, and it carries some weight in that way. And then as we iterate underneath that, it even though you have to start somewhere, and we wanted to have like a very broad raise the baseline type approach when we first launch. Right now, it can start to carry more and more weight as we continue to refine it over time. But the entire time, it always did mean something highly specific that can carry some advantages as far as building trust and helping add clarity to precisely what a company that has this certification has accomplished as far as their key management security.
Great, thank you, Mark. And Joel, how about for you? How about for Coinbase and with the token integration standard?
Yeah, I know Max and Mark have already talked a little bit about like the goals of like having a audit framework and bringing in folks to certify, and I'm not going to repeat that too much. I think that's definitely the goal for the asset integration standard. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach for answering this question. When we showed that slide earlier of the different companies that are part of BSCC, and if you look at them, they are truly the top, Web3 security companies. And so on the Coinbase side, we're really excited to partner together on this. But also, as we look at it, Figment putting together the NOS, really using that and applying it to our systems internally, Turnkey as well, and working with them. And so it's like really the goal of the BSCC is to not just say like, hey, here's a baseline for people outside of, getting fresh into it. I think it's also saying like, what are we doing across the industry to make it better, and how can we help each other become stronger in general? And so I know within Coinbase, we're taking a look at that. We talked about, Max was saying some self-certification. We're also looking to do that as well. We'd love to bring that across all three. Within Coinbase, the controls we talked about in the standard, we already look at when we come to a lot of our token security side of things. I said it's not comprehensive. There's some things that we look at that were not included, but we already apply a lot of that to our security program today. What I would like to expand on in the future, and I kind of mentioned earlier, is more general Web3 on-chain SDLC and controls there. If you look at that slide again, I wish we could just pop it up. If we can't pop it up, it's fine. But there's a lot of fantastic Web3 auditing firms that we're working together with to now say, okay, what about like non-asset related smart contract security? And I'm really excited to grow that expansion side of it. I know Coinbase is a very large blockchain security team. And so we're going to bring a presence there and then work with those leaders to really build out a more comprehensive framework, which I think will not only be for digital assets, but a lot more expansion as we see the world become more on-chain.
Thank you, Joel. It's good to hear, like with everyone, that we're not just sort of putting standards out. We're doing a lot of kind of working internally, eating our own cooking kind of thing around that and promoting it. So really super helpful to kind of help push that work out. I see some questions starting to come in. So I just want to do one more round with just on that fourth standard, which is the more broad-based security and privacy standard that we published as well. So, Max, I'm going to turn to you first, I think, on this, and sort of what's the rationale? Sort of obviously we want to get some baseline in around security and privacy. It's so critical around blockchain, but tell me a little bit more about the rationale on what that standard looks like.
Yeah, sure. GSP wasn't one of the original standards that we decided that we set out to sort of map out and work on, but it was an emergent standard that came from us working on the other ones, right? So, as we were working on the three standards we've already talked about, there were some things that like didn't quite fit or fit a little bit or was overlap within all of the three. So we decided to sort of break those out instead of repeating ourselves. And instead of having these three standards as like monolithic individual things, having like a bit of a BSSC package with a set of standards that are cohesive and build on each other. So we created that GSP that kind of sits on the bottom. We had a nice diagram, but it really underpins sort of all of the other things that we've talked about, right? We designed it to be a bit more of like an on-ramp, like a security basics. It's designed to be very approachable for brand new crypto companies or well-established ones. And we largely sourced it from a lot of our individual DDQ questions, right? So like you can almost look at it like a DDQ, like a due diligence questionnaire. It has a lot of those basic things that any company operating in the space should hit on. It's draws from established standards like the ISO and SOC 2, but doesn't go so far as to just repeat, right? So that was like a large theme at the BSSCs. We don't want to just repeat standards. We want to improve. So yeah, like it's risk management, cybersecurity best practices, and then privacy, right? Especially in the crypto space where privacy means something or can mean something a bit different than in like traditional spaces, right? Is a wallet address private? Well, maybe, right? And you should think about those things. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to hop in and add their thoughts, but yeah, I guess I should also say it's based on NIST, right? Based on the CSF to make it a bit more approachable.
Great. I think that's good to sometimes align with those existing standards out there as well. Joel or Mark or Anna, do you have any feedback on that? Max had a great coverage of that one, but
Max had a great coverage, yeah.
So, all right, got thumbs up for that, Max. Safe was just So before we turn to questions, we got a few coming in there. Any kind of final thoughts from anyone around any of the standards, security standards? I think one thing is sort of I've heard a lot about sort of being approachable, digestible standards so that they're sort of can hit a wider audience. If you're sort of on this webinar or in general, like from a target audience, who is this sort of all these sort of when you say intended for? Like what is the target audience for all of these? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in, or Joel or Mark or Max or Anna.
Yeah, I can jump in and I'll add a few other general thoughts, but the target audience I would say is primarily the builders and the implementers. And so if you're one of those folks on this call, I would encourage you, just hop over to the standards. The link was in the chat. I'm sure we can provide it again. And just like take just a few minutes to skim it. You don't have to like set it aside and make it a to-do item that you have to come back to read them all. Just take a look. They're meant to be simple. They're meant to be intuitive. They're out there. And then the second thing I'd encourage you to do is join us and help contribute to them. We would love to see some other participation and continue to refine them with a broader and broader group over time.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, Mark.
I would
Go ahead,
also,
Anna.
sorry, I'd also like just to add a couple things. I think a few takeaways, hope you're realizing is that we're at a point where a lot of the right people are talking. So in our industry, and that's what's very cool about the BSSC and the efforts that are happening here. We aren't siloing, right? We're coming together and understanding how we're impacting each other and things like that. We had a few, a lot of strategy conversations around this, but there were problem statements we had to get through, which was a topic that was brought up today. Hey, there's standards being developed. Are we just going to be another standard? And really, we want to complement other standards. We want to reference them as well in our due diligence questionnaires, and we want to partner. So it's not that ours is better, but we want to complement each other and continue those dialogues and have those conversations. So at the end of the day, a standard is a standard, and we really want to go that next phase and turn these standards into audible attestations and certifications. So having a BSSC logo to say, yep, I meet all these standards, and share it with third parties or other companies, exchanges, banks, all of those, right, that care about security. That's really what we're trying to do.
Great, thanks, Anna. That's a great summary of kind of where we are and where we're going on that. Let me turn. There's a few questions that have come in from the audience, and I'm going to try to summarize because some of them are somewhat similar, I think, in terms of with our standards. And you touched on this a little bit. How are we? In the development of these, did we look at how we align with broader standard organizations, with NIST, ISO, what kind of mapping was done? People mentioned MITRE's ADAPT framework as well. So did any thought process go into that? What was sort of the idea around mapping to existing standards and and working with some and sort of mapping with some of those existing standards groups?
I can jump in.
All right. And then Joel jumped off mute too, so you got a couple.
Oh no. Okay. I'm just going to say yes. We did a considerable mapping effort to all the standards out there, but I'll hand it over to the rest of the team.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but one of the goals of the initial token integration standard was to really be focused on that token side of it, the custody side of it. And so that's why we want to make it so while it was influenced by a lot of standards out there already, it also was very pointed in a particular area. The MITRE ADAPT framework is fantastic. We're still going through and processing it, but I think it also is has that same focus of it's very comprehensive in its recommendations. It talks about operational risk. It talks about blockchain risk. It talks about more of Web 2 to Web 3 type of risk as well. And I think all those things we want to weigh out, consider, and have that in future sides of it. But I think what we're really focused on today is giving a very durable starting point for saying, if I'm deploying a digital asset on a particular chain, here's what you should look at. Where I think the MITRE framework is a little bit more comprehensive. The other ones, the NIST framework side of it, the KMS, GSCP, I think they're all fantastic, something we're considering, but I think for this set, we have a very pointed goal of saying this is the baseline and then working with compliance folks and audit folks to build this into something that we can then say, you are now at this level, right? So it is not the goal here is to not say, this is it. We definitely will continue to work with other partners. I'm really interested in working with MITRE and potentially pulling them into this group. And to the people that are putting in the questions, I'd also encourage you to join BSCC and help bridge the gap. If you're already working with these partners, there's a lot of excitement whenever we get new people and new ideas. And so I would also say, like, if you're currently working on them, let's do it a collaborative exercise instead of a, how does one meet the other?
Great. Thank you, Joel. That's great summary of things. Any else want to add, Mark or Max, on that one? All right. You got it all covered, Joel. So thank you. And Anna on that. So I had one question is had one from an individual saying, we seem more sort of company focused and stuff. How would an individual who's got experience in blockchain or security work get involved with BSSC? Is there a way to kind of look at the standards after? What's sort of I guess once it's published, there's an opportunity, but is there have we thought about anything beyond that?
Yes. So one, I would say go out to our site and just click on the contact button if you have interest. We do have different levels of members, and we're always looking at other ways to bring individuals in. So yeah, if that's the one thing that could be preventing you from participating, let's not that be a blocker. So just reach out.
Right. Thank you. And then I have a couple other, we kind of touched a little bit about sort of how the BSSC standards compare to some of the other ones that are out there. And then also looking at, there's a question about how do we, could we include control IDs from standards like NIST and others within our standards and obviously mapping is helpful, so that's sort of a tool on that. Any thoughts around that, or any of the specific other standards, how we might compare to others going on that individual companies have as well?
I guess my answer is yes, we've talked about that. We're really at this phase with the standards on how to then put it into an auditable framework. So we are working with audit firms. And I would say as part of that, there will be some mapping available.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so we're about wrapped. We're going to have a couple minutes for close, and then I just want to see, is anyone, before we turn back to Anna to give kind of where BSSC is going in the future, Max, Joel, Mark, anyone any final thoughts on anything before we turn back to Anna to wrap? Okay. Well, I thank you guys. Obviously, we've done a lot of work has gone into these standards, and a lot of expertise. We're fortunate to have such experts in the field working on BSSC, and to have you guys here working on that. So thank you for your time and for all the work around the standards. I'll turn it over to Anna to talk a little bit about kind of where we're going next, what some of the things we're looking at, and encourage everyone to think about joining and checking on the website and reach out to us. So Anna, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I touched on a few things already that was going to be in closing, but the timing was right. So I did some of that earlier. We obviously this is no small feat to get here. There have been a lot of people working on these standards and a lot of time. As you can see, we published 4 standards. You can go out to blockchainssc.org to see those and take a look. But there is still much to do, right? I talked a little bit about how we are in this phased approach where it's like publishing the standards. People should be able to use these standards for readiness, internal readiness assessments. And then we are on the back end working with auditing firms to create an audit framework so that it's auditable and there's a logo and a certification, attestation, all of that. We will always continue to evaluate these standards and improve. This is not a one and done and then forget it. It is a continued practice. So we're always looking for new members, like I said, new contributors. We have different types. Reach out via the contact button. I did see a couple more questions filter in, so we may not get to all of those. But again, if you go out to the website, hit contact, ask your question, we'll definitely get back to you. We may even add it to our FAQ that's out on the site as well. In addition to evaluating the standards, we do have a couple more that we're working on right now. One is smart contracts, and then more on the token side of the house. We're also working on getting in front of policymakers. And that's a really big effort with the regulatory entities, because we do feel that, right now is the time. There's a lot of talk and efforts on the regulatory front, and it's really important that we can come together, add some education, and find a way to partner while policies are being done. So last but not least, again, we're always looking for new members. So, or if you just want to learn more, you can reach out through blockchainssc.org.
Great. Thank you, Anna. That's great. Great summary. Again, we are, continue to work on new standards and work on updates to the ones that we've published. I know we had one. I'll also say, like, if you have other questions and stuff, definitely hit the contact button. I think there's one slide that has my email on there, that if you have other questions, we can happy to do that. But I will look forward to talking to all of you guys again. Thank you for being here for this, and thanks to the audience for everyone for joining. We will get to so we'll capture these other questions. We'll get those out to the panelists and to everyone to get response to you, and we look forward to future collaboration. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.